Today is August 29th. It's the 241st day of the year, and this is the On This Day podcast. At midnight on this day in 2005, Hurricane Katrina moves through the Gulf as a Category 4 hurricane with wind speeds of over 150 miles an hour. In the early morning hours, as the storm surge hits the coast of Mississippi and the southern tip of Louisiana, the hurricane inches forward at 12 miles an hour. A slow storm like Katrina is far more destructive than a faster-moving storm. Shortly after 6 a.m., the eye of the storm makes landfall at the mouth of the Mississippi River, wiping the town of Burris, Louisiana off the map. Over the next hour, in Plaquemine Parish, the fragile marshland that envelops the river as it flows out of the country and into the Gulf, just about every structure in the parish is destroyed. At 3 a.m., water breaks through the wall of the 17th Street Canal on the north side of New Orleans, between Lakeview and Metairie, west of City Park. Pump station operators begin pumping water out of the city and back into the canal. By 7 a.m., the London Avenue levee has failed, breached on both sides, east and west, pouring water into the Gentilly neighborhood. In a few hours' time, the pump station will be overwhelmed and workers will be ordered to abandon the station. At 8 a.m., as hurricane-force winds blow in Pascagoula, Biloxi, Pass Christian, and New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin appears on the Today Show. He tells the hosts that he anticipates there will be flooding. It's just a matter of how much. Flooding is one thing Mayor Nagin is certain of this morning. Yet it hasn't even been 24 hours since he issued a mandatory evacuation of the city. Town mayors and civic leaders in southern Louisiana and Mississippi order a mandatory evacuation on August 27th, 2 days before the storm hits. Also on the 27th, the LSPCA in New Orleans evacuates all 263 stray animals from its shelter, sending them to a shelter in Texas. And oil workers are airlifted off of the oil rigs in the Gulf. But in New Orleans, on the 27th, it's business as usual. Mayor Nagin and his lawyers contemplate a mandatory evacuation, but they're concerned about lawsuits from businesses and hotels that would lose money as a result. Nagin urges people to take this storm seriously. He urges the 485,000 residents of the city to leave of their own accord. But that's easier said than done. Some residents choose to ride the storm out in the city. Those who have been through hurricanes before and scoff at the warnings. And those who make a party of it, gravitating to the French Quarter and imbibing of the rum and fruit punch concoction that is a French Quarter mainstay, the hurricane. But the vast majority of those left in the city are predominantly the poor and African American, who can't leave. When Mayor Nagin issues a mandatory evacuation on the morning of August 28th, there are 100,000 people living in New Orleans who have no car, no means of transportation, no way to get out of the city, or they are old and invalid and simply can't leave without assistance. And that assistance doesn't come until it's too late. Over 360 city buses and countless more school buses are parked in lots with no one to drive them, and no one bothers to coordinate drivers for the buses. Amtrak has 5 trains that leave New Orleans on the 28th. They reach out to the city offering empty seats for evacuation. The city does not respond. At 8:30 p.m. on the 28th, the last Amtrak train leaves, a ghost train, passing out of town with 700 empty seats. 10,000 people are admitted to the Superdome, the shelter of last resort. The rest are scattered throughout the city that sits below sea level behind a ring of walls of faulty design. At 8:15 a.m., a loud boom is heard in the lower Ninth Ward as the industrial canal is breached. Water rushes into the lower Ninth, picking up houses, lifting them off their foundations and carrying them away. The lower Ninth Ward is a poor neighborhood east of the French Quarter. Its residents are primarily African Americans who take pride in the small homes they own and in their community. All of that is washed away in the rush of water through the levee breach, and within an hour, the lower Ninth is under 8 feet of water. The eye of the storm is 40 miles southeast of New Orleans, the winds blowing at 135 miles an hour. At 9 a.m., the wind rips the roof covering off of the Superdome, opening up 2 holes in the roof, exposing the tempestuous sky to those sheltering below inside the stadium. At 10:30 a.m., President George Bush declares emergency disasters in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. At 11 a.m., Michael Brown, the director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, orders 1,000 FEMA workers to the Gulf Coast, but with no urgency, giving them 2 days to get there. At 3 p.m., as the storm moves north across Lake Pontchartrain, the storm pressure pushes the lake water south into the canals, causing the levee breaches to widen. At 5 p.m., 1,000 residents who have been rescued from the floodwaters are dropped off at the convention center and told to wait for evacuation buses. The convention center is locked, and it will be days before buses arrive. As daylight begins to fade, Coast Guard helicopters pull stranded residents off of their rooftops. The 7 Coast Guard helicopters in the sky do the best they can. At 8 p.m., Louisiana Governor Kathleen Blanco talks with President Bush. She asks him for everything he's got. An hour and a half later, the president calls it a night and heads off to bed without having taken any action on Governor Blanco's request. Just before midnight on this day in 2005, the storm has dissipated and passed north into Mississippi. Piecemeal rescue efforts are underway in New Orleans, and the people left outside the convention center have broken down the doors and moved inside for the night. They will be joined by 20,000 more residents the next day. Hurricane Katrina is by far the costliest natural disaster in U.S. history. Between the breached levees in New Orleans and the flattened towns in Mississippi, the damage wreaked by the storm stretches across 90,000 square miles at a cost of $108 billion, a swath of devastation that has not been seen in 100 years. And it is certainly one of the deadliest natural disasters in U.S. history as well. By the time the floodwaters recede, more than 1,800 people will be dead from the storm, from the aftermath, and from the gross incompetence of government leaders, the confluence of which we collectively refer to as Katrina. By the end of this day in 2005, 80% of New Orleans is underwater, and the nightmare has just begun. There are 124 days left in the year.